You know, everyone in this room, at some point, there arose some desire to begin your spiritual search. And that's a beautiful point. And it's a mystery. And it's awesome. And it is full of promise and full of warning. But one thing that the spiritual search does is it begins to point out the traps of the material world, beginning with the body, the traps of the body, and identification with the body, and the enormity of that, the seeming solidity of that because of the flesh, how big that is, and the desires that arise in the body, and the appetites of the body, and the needs of the body, and the survival of the body. This is the primary initial focus of really the spiritual inquiry, and it's essential. You know, this has to be faced head on. This is really facing death. It's really, we're talking about death of the body, and I speak about that most of the time. And not that the body has to die, or that the desires have to die, or the impulses have to die, or the appetites have to die, but they have to be met head on, so that the recognition of the truth of who you are is not tied up in the body, not bound, not entrapped in the body. And then the next level, of course, is the emotional traps, and they are huge because they seem much more real because they're more subtle. And they can't actually be located as a physical thing or arising from a physical thing. They just appear, you know, as a flood of energy or withdrawal of energy or some form of emotional life. And then the mental, you know, mental is tied up in all of it. So we even need to talk about the mental because mental is everywhere. You know, without the mental, there's no identification with the physical, there's no identification with the emotional, and there's no identification with the thought process. So that's the spiritual search right there, you know, is really seeing that, meeting that, the horror of it, the impossibility of it, the frustration of it. And then there comes a time where you have to face the the spiritual body, the spiritual emotions, the spiritual thought process. And those are the spiritual traps. That's the entrapment. And everyone in this room has been entrapped by that. And you're supposed to be. That's part of it. It's not like you're not supposed to get entrapped. You are. You have to get entrapped. In all of it. In the physical, the emotional, the mental, in order to recognize even what a trap is. So since you are spiritual people, and you know that's a beautiful definition at the beginning. It's a way of separating yourself from the following of the materialistic, physical, emotional, mental plane. It's a way of saying no. And so and this is really the crux of what I have to say. It's perfect at the beginning. It's not a trap at the beginning. It's a door to freedom. It's like, yes. And then it's a trap, whatever it is. And the sweetest trap and the hardest traps to meet are the spiritual traps, because they're the good ones. You know, I've conquered the ego. I'm almost enlightened, or I am enlightened. Or there's no ego here. I'm empty. I'm happy all the time. Or the reverse of that. I'm not enlightened yet. I'm not empty. I'm entrapped. That's the trap. Those are the jaws of the trap. I am not. And so really the point is, there's nothing wrong with the traps on any level. This we usually come into the spiritual search really knowing there's something wrong with the physical entrapments and the mental and the emotional entrapments. And then there has to come a time of recognition. It's not about right and wrong. It's not what the issue is. They are what they are, period. And they're simply more than that, much more than that. And when there's an identification with that, there's a lack of recognition of what's more. That's all. It's not that they're right or wrong.